Daytona Beach. Great morning. It's so good to be with everybody. I love the energy. We've already got a good start moving forward. I know it's going to be a great day. Today's topic in our BMG is victimhood or victor. So we got a lot of juicy stuff. If you can pull your PDF up, I'm going to go ahead and show this to you all. But I really like this quote. You are not a helpless victim of your own thoughts, but rather a master of your own mind. And it kind of goes to what Matt was just saying, is we all face these battles, but eventually one is going to prevail. And that's just the way it is. So you got to understand that shifting from being helpless to ownership is one of the most key components in being a victor. Really quickly, by show of hands, has anybody here heard of the game Sequence before? No? Nobody's heard this one? Man, okay, cool. I highly recommend. This is a great family game. It's very simple. It's a strategy board game. So essentially, it takes 2 decks of cards. It has a board, and it has every card on there 2 times. You get a bag of tokens, and you want to build a sequence, which is similar to like checkers, right? So instead of having 4 in a row, you'd have 5 in a row. And you can do this vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Now, the thing about the game Sequence is I've been playing this for a very long time, and I've become pretty good at it. So every time I play with somebody that has never played the game before, they always ask, what is the best thing you can tell me in strategizing how to play this game? Because it is a strategy game. And I tell everybody, you always want to play offense, not defense. When we see people focus on the defensive constantly, they never score and they never win the game of Sequence. And so I'll get into these games with people where they're only trying to defend. And so they never win the game. That is the same with this example from victimhood or victorhood. The point is that when you get stuck on the defensive, on the victim side, you can never really win the game. So, by the way, if you guys like the board games with your family or just independently, I highly recommend checking that one out. So,
how many people is it good for, Keegan?
I believe you can play up to 9.
Is it good for 2 people to play for it?
What's that?
Is it good for 2 people to play, or
Yep.
you really need more 4 or 5 or whatever?
You can do 2 to 9.
Okay.
So you can split into teams, which is, it makes it fun. But I'm going to share a story with you guys really quickly. You guys know I love my stories, and some of you have already heard this one, but this just always resonates with me because this actually took place in 2011. It's a true story, and it's stuck with me ever since. I went to college with this individual named Tim, and Tim and I became friends. We were roommates, lived together, all this good stuff. Tim had a really successful career in the insurance world. He had built out a team, was making great money, but he wasn't passionate about what he was doing. So ever since Tim was a little kid, he was a mixed martial artist. He had worked his way up in the karate system. He trained the likes of Krav Maga, all kinds of very, very high intense mixed martial arts and hand-to-hand combat. He got to a point where he was a renowned trainer, and he still does it to this day in North Carolina. But he told me this story, and I'll never forget this story. The story takes place with a Green Beret. And so they are training, doing the hand-to-hand combat. Now, of course, when they're teaching these techniques and maneuvers, this will literally save somebody's life in the field of battle, right? It is life or death, truly. So he's expressing this story, the Green Beret, about how he was overseas and he was separated from his party. At some point, he had run out of ammo and he came into a close quarters with an infidel. So it was hand-to-hand combat, just the 2 of them. And they're sitting there fighting for their lives. One guy is in the chokehold. And this is where I want to stop. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for a quick second. So at this point, the guy's in the chokehold, and I just to ask the group, what would you do in this scenario? And you can just shout it out. What would you do in this scenario?
My life's on the line. I'm still fighting.
Yeah, I mean, I think more. It's essentially, if that's the case, then yeah, it's all in.
Let's go. Anybody else?
That's it. Win or die.
Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing. I never distinguished who was in the chokehold, right? And so this is a perfect analogy when you're analyzing victim or victor, because you could have very easily been on the other side with the guy in your arm, in which case you would have squeezed tighter, right? Different outcome. But this is a really good analogy. And I always stop and ask myself this exact question. I go through this exact scenario whenever my emotions are really high. I have to stop and say, you know what? Am I the victim right now? Or am I squeezing harder in that chokehold? And so again, just a simple visual that has always stuck with me. But going back to the sheet. So I want to share a couple of these with you because these come up all the time in different areas. And often we don't pinpoint that these are coming from a victim mentality. I've done this one before. I hear this one from people all the time. My finances are not great. You know what? It's because nobody ever taught us this stuff in school. Nobody ever taught us how to do taxes. Nobody taught us how to invest or save money. Well, guess what? It's not their responsibility to, right? And when we put ourselves on that place, we are deferring ownership. And when we defer ownership, that is playing the victim. I can't start my own business. I don't have the resources like other people do. This brings up one of my favorite Tony Robbins quotes. It's not that you lack the resources, it's that you lack resourcefulness. Everybody is put in similar situations, more or less. It's not about what you have available to you. It's about finding a way to make that work. I hear this one all the time too. And again, this one reigned over me for a while. I'll never be successful because nobody in my family ever showed me how to. Or nobody in my family is successful. So I just can't, it's not for me. I'll never be that person, right? Everyone in my family is they do this a certain way, and that's just not how I am, or that's how we are, right? And so this one in particular, you ever hear where somebody's like, oh, I'm big boned, or it's just my family, everybody in my family is just really big, you know? And so they use that as a victim mentality to not lose weight, to not go on the health journey, to not eat the apple over the donut, right? We've always done it this way. I know Bob's heard this one in the executive world, but that one's catastrophic. We hear this all the time. Hey guys, we've always done it this way, so we're just not going to change anything. That is a victim mentality. It crushes a company. By the way, change is constant. It's inevitable. So if you're not changing and adapting with the marketplace, you are going to fall behind. If you want a really good book on that, read Good to Great. Great one for that. So this one's really big too. This happened to me as a child, so that's why I act this way. Now, really quickly on this note, Freud was quoted for stating, give me a child at birth, and by age 7, I will be able to show you the man. What he was really saying is that between the age of birth and age 7, you start to develop your patterns and habits. Now, what frequently happens is because we don't have maturity, we're not fully developed, we haven't had life experiences, we get stuck behind those patterns in survival mode, and then it becomes so much a part of our defense mechanism. So we go throughout life and we tell ourselves, well, I've always done it this way, so I can't change. It's too late for me, right? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. That could not be further from the truth. And I can go into a whole tangent on that. This is the element of neurogenesis. The world does not want me to win. Every time I get 2 steps forward, I go 5 steps back. You guys heard this one before? That is a victim mentality. And so let me stop here. Is there anything that stands out to people on the call right now? Anything that stands out to you guys in the group? Have you heard these before? Have you ever said these before? Or do you have maybe a different spin on these that you'd like to share?
I've had a lot of, family members say, it's, too old to change,
Mm.
and this is the way that things have been done. I mean, so much of what you're saying resonates for me because that's the people I've been associated with in my life, where it's basically the easy way out to not take accountability, responsibility, or have any level of humility. And a lot of the times, the victim mentality is associated with narcissism because they don't want to admit to wrongdoing, and it's never them, so they're always the victim. They're never the perpetrator. So unfortunately, it rings a bell and not taco and not jingle. And so I get it in terms of what's going on there.
Yeah, great stuff, Matt. I think that, you touch on some points, but you're 100% right. I mean, we see this in different forms, right? And so it's not always ourselves, but this can also be a part of our environment, which I know I've had conversations with people recently, but toxicity is not limited to just friends, right? Or coworkers. Our family members can be extremely toxic. And that's tough because we don't get to choose our family members. We're born into it, right? But protecting that environment at all costs is huge. Even if those people are on the victim mentality in your family, it's not to say, hey, I don't love you, I'm not ever going to talk to you or see you. It's just, I'm going to limit your access to me because building my circle is so important. Anybody else heard these in different contexts, or anything you want to share here on these statements?
It's about learning boundaries, right?
Definitely a huge element, for sure. For sure.
One thing that you said, Keegan, made me think of something from Nietzsche, and that was to reach your end destination of becoming the overhuman, as he calls it, you have to overcome your environment. And so, you know what? Maybe that did happen to you as a child. Maybe nobody did teach you that. Maybe you weren't given some of the resources like you've seen happen to some other people. But if you don't take the steps to overcome that, then you'll stay the victim forever. And to Matt's point, it's just the easy way out. Because if you can't take accountability in the situation, you'll never get out of it. You have to run uphill sometimes, and the fight is hard, but you have to do it.
Well said. And that brings up another idea here to me. I did a speech earlier this morning on manifestation, and I want to bring a little bit of a different element to the concept of manifestation. I want you to think of it like this. Has anybody ever played the lottery before? Did you know that more corporations or entities win the lottery than anybody else? Why is that? Because what they do often is they will create a pool of people that are putting out the same numbers, or they're all giving the same energy to the same end result collectively, right? So they're manifesting the outcome of winning the lottery. Now, when we go through this manifestation process, what I'm really saying, and one of the cool elements here, is that, look, we talked about the law of attraction. That's in line with manifestation. And in the law of attraction, we put out a particular energy, which creates our frequency, right? And that goes out into the world, that vibration, and then it brings that energy back. So when we talk about manifestation, when we talk about victimhood, it is that you can get better results simply by getting more energy behind the goal that you desire. Well, how the heck do we do that? You get more energy behind your desired outcome by simply helping other people. When you genuinely help people authentically, more people are bought into your cause, your purpose, and therefore in the world, you've got more energy behind whatever that goal is. I see this come up all the time. Now, that's not what our talk is about today. We're going to save that. If you guys want to talk about this, we absolutely can. But the point is that energy outwardly expressed is basically the divide of victim or victimhood. You know, we can look at it as the light or the dark, and it's always a choice. It's always there. So Good stuff. Good stuff. And that was kind of a fusion of what Miles and Matt said. When we get into the 3 steps here, the first and most important part is to isolate the story or the emotion that we're telling ourselves. Often when we get into this victim mentality, we can not even address that we are. And then at some point we'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was reacting that way until it was too late. And then the damage is already done. You can't change it or fix it, right? So you must isolate that story or emotion. When we think about the finances, for example, well, what we're really saying, my finances aren't great, it's because nobody taught me this in school. Well, let's isolate that story or emotion. The essence is that somebody's saying this, they simply are saying that, hey, look, my finances are not where I want them to be. Okay. So what are the next steps? Well, you want to take control over your finances. That requires ownership. And so that first part might be research. You might have to learn about finances. Again, I grew up in a family of stockbrokers and nobody told me this stuff. You know, I had all of the resources surrounding me, and yet nobody pulled me aside to have a conversation. Now, it's within my power to pull them aside and ask them to take me under their wing, right? It's not their responsibility, just like it's not school's responsibility to teach you about taxes. So I really like the concept that when we think about triggers, you know, what we're doing is we're addressing one singular emotion. Whenever we are triggered, what is the emotion that is being elicited, right? So the thing is that often, let's just say frustration, for example. If you showed frustration because your finances aren't where you want them to be, this is a culmination of reinforced habits and patterns over years. It's not just one thing that happened and you lost all your money or you just didn't have the right finances. It's a culmination of the wrong small decisions repeated over and over and over and over until one day a crisis occurs and then you're forced to take action on that act, right? So one of the really cool things, and this goes back to what you guys were saying earlier, is that 2 opposite emotions cannot reside in the same space. If you want a really good model for this, Plutchik has an awesome model. You can look him up, Plutchik, online. It's a very cool visual, and it basically uses colors and opposites. So the point is that worry and joy are on opposite sides of the spectrum. So they cannot occupy the same exact space. You cannot be joyful and worried at the same time. It doesn't work that way. One will show its head over the other, and eventually one will take reign over the environment. So for me, I really like that because it provides a visual. The Plutchik visual is, okay, if I'm operating on fear or doubt or worry or inconsistency or aggression or whatever it is, I look to the opposite. And whether that's joy, elation, contentedness, whatever it is, then you shift your energy towards that positive, right? So first and foremost, we must be able to recognize the emotion that's going on. And there's some people in this room that are extremely good at this. It's taken a lot of development and time, but having that self-awareness to isolate the emotion. Any questions or comments here before we go to the next part? Bob.
So the word frustration is very important to me because in my practice, it's the one thing when I find the victim or somebody finds themselves in victimhood, everything is happening to me. I'm at the affect of the world. Frustration is the first sign that they're moving out of victimhood. Being frustrated at being a victim is the first sign. And I really look to that and use that energy because it's the first piece, it's the first energy used to get out of victimhood. Yeah, we want to get to joy, but it's almost impossible to go straight from victimhood to joy. You could do it very fast. It doesn't have to take a long time. But the catalyst, if you will, is frustration or anger. Why am I not getting to win here? Is the first recognition of wanting to be out of victimhood. So frustration is something that I look for. It's a positive.
That was gold. That was gold. I love that distinction, Bob. and this is a really great way for us individually to stop and recognize here. So are you telling yourself this is happening to me, or is this happening for me? Right? I'll give you an example. When I went to buy this house, I found a house down the road. It was about 5 miles down the road. And I thought this was the perfect house. It had absolutely everything I could possibly want. It had the barn, it had the farm, it had the land, it had the creek, it had the kitchen, like everything that I wanted in a house it had. And I took my day off of work because it was 4.5 hours south of me. So I got in the car at 5 a.m, all ready to go check this house out. I get in the car, I drive all the way down, show up. It's like 9:30 in the morning. And I come to find out they just closed on it about an hour before I got there. I was devastated. I spent all my time driving down there, doing the research. I was emotionally attached to the outcome of this was going to be my house. I was all in. And then it got taken from me. And I was like, why did this happen to me? Why did I not get this house? I was devastated. But then I started to shift the vernacular. And I started to tell myself that there was a reason this happened, right? This happened for me because there was something that I couldn't see right now, not to me. I kid you not, about a month and a half, 2 months passed. I ended up closing on this house. And I still, a little piece of me still missed that first house. So I drove down to check it out. Cause again, it's only about 5 miles from my house. I drove down to check it out and the homeowners were outside and I got the chance to talk to them. And they told me 3 weeks after they closed, their well dried up. They had to drill a new well and it cost them tens of thousands of dollars. So in the situation at first, I was very reactive and emotional. And I was wondering, why did this happen to me? Like Bob was saying, right? But then when I shifted the vernacular and started saying this happened for me, it allowed me to change my perspective and look for that outcome that I truly wanted. And then when I found out that their well dried up, it was full conviction. Well, I didn't get the house because I wasn't supposed to go buy a new well. So I ended up winning in that scenario. But again, just like Bob is saying, this is a really good distinction. And of course, you were talking about the frustration being the point of taking ownership. But that question that you posed at the beginning is huge. Is this happening to me or is this happening for me? And when you can simply shift between those points, that's where you shift your perspective and start to manifest the better results.
Hey, Keegan.
Yeah.
Did you give those people your well wishes?
Yeah, we did a Make-A-Wish Foundation.
There you go.
All right, so part 2, pattern recognition. Again, we talked about the element of self-awareness. This is not something that just happens immediately. This takes a ton of practice because we are very emotional creatures and the emotion takes over. And so we have to stop and recognize that. So this is where having somebody that I personally believe that is non-biased is really helpful in articulating those blind spots. Here's why, because often we will have people that are friends or their family members in our circle, and they want us to feel good about ourselves. So sometimes they boost our ego, but they're not truthful with us. And they do it because they think they're coming from a place of love or protection or betterment, but truly they're enabling us. So, that self-awareness takes a lot of practice. And in my experience, the way that I got to that point a lot quicker was by bringing a non-biased source to help me identify those places that I could not see. Now, there's a whole different exercise on this, and this is one of my favorite ones. I've done this with a couple people, but we come up, and it goes back to that childhood, right? About Freud. We come up with conclusions based on an experience that we went through. And then as we go throughout life, we basically go into situations and say, does this support our conclusion or does it not? And if it supports our conclusion, it keeps us captive under the victim mentality, because we could say something like this: all people are bad, or people are untrustworthy, or they're selfish, or they're only out for themselves. And then we get into scenarios and we go, oh, well, well, I'm not going to help anybody else because they're already just out to get themselves, right? They're out for themselves. And then we close that bridge and we devoid ownership. So you got to understand that your habits and patterns are reactions of your emotional interpretation. And we repeat this over and over and over again, unless something catastrophic forces us to react a different way. For instance, we can look at health for this example. Let's say that you live a particular way and you're not very strict about your health and you eat whatever you want and you don't really take care of the exercise in your body. And then you go to the doctor in your 50s and your doctor's like, hey, look, if you don't change some of your habits, you're going to have heart disease in the next 3 years. Well, now you're forced to take action, right? But those patterns were there the whole time. My point is that often we wait until a crisis occurs to force us into ownership, where we should really be taking ownership before we ever get to a crisis. Any questions or thoughts here?
Well, just my thought is like we create our own self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Like we look, because it's a pattern, we already look for the answer that supports our pre-existing patterns, our pre-existing thought processes, etc. And that's why it takes work to get out of that, right? Like Bob said, you know, is it happening for you? The other thing that I've tried to do is I get to.
Yes.
It's not I have to, it's I get to.
Exactly. And that's the perspective shift, right? The world is not as we see it. The way that we view the world is based on our interpretation. It's our perspective, right? But I that's a great point. That's a great point, Brennan. And again, it comes back to being able to shift your perspective. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, two things I'd like to just go back step on and step with Brandon, what he says, because as long as we're here and we're breathing, we always get to. Like you always have the opportunity to get to, and to get to do something different is what I'll say after that, right? I mean, you're never the victim because you're here, you're breathing. You're only the victim. You only succumb to being victimhood when you're not on Earth any longer. So you always have that opportunity, because I love that get to. The other thing I want to just bring up in terms of the manifestation is the idea the idea of the house not being there and it's happening to you kind of thing. Sometimes it's too much to go from, wait a second, this is a positive thing for me, even though I can't see what it is. I missed the house. Sometimes just to get to neutral is the tipping point in manifestation. When you can get to neutral and just say, this is neither positive nor negative, it's just something that happened. I have no idea if losing this house was positive or negative because I don't know what the future holds. It's at least neutral. If you can get yourself to neutral, it's the beginning space for the universe to start bringing you into more things that could be positive, because it's the space where you can start to see more positive things. Getting to neutral is the tipping point in manifestation. And it allows the universe to start bringing you things that are more positive. And it's easier sometimes to get to neutral if you think about it's neither happening to you nor for you. It just happened. And let's see what happens after that once I get to do something next. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I had to say it.
No, you're spot on. You're spot on. Here's what you got to understand, guys. Based on Bob's point, good and bad are human constructs. That's not a part of the natural law of natural world. You know, if a rabbit goes out on a little morning walk and a fox gets the rabbit, that's not a bad or good thing. It's part of the system, right? So good and bad is simply a human construct, and we come up with these based on our emotional interpretations. So yeah, Bob, you're a 100% right there. Here's another thing. I like to break this down by thinking about the 3 different versions of us. There's the past us, there's the present us, and the future us. Whenever we are thinking of things in terms of good or bad, that means that we are not in the present. It means that we are either stuck in the past or we're stuck in the future. For instance, anxiety, if you're ever feeling a level of anxiety, that automatically tells me that you're stuck in the future. You're worried about what's to come. If you are depressed, that means you're stuck on something that happened in the past, what had already occurred. So if you're feeling depression, past, or anxiety, future, you need to pull yourself back into the present, because just like Bob is saying, good and bad are human construct. It's not part of natural law. It doesn't help us survive or unsurvive. This is part of our defensive mechanism in the survival mode, because, thousands of years ago, if something occurred and we viewed it as bad, we had to protect ourselves. We had to protect our family. If a saber-toothed tiger was right in front of us, that was quote unquote bad, and we had to survive from that scenario. Well, now we're apex predators. We're at the top of the food chain, so we don't face those same things to date, right? So yeah, 100%, Bob. Anybody else have anything? Because I saw some light bulbs go off when Bob was saying that.
I just want to say that I'm not saying there isn't value in judging good or bad. There is, but it is a human construct, and so use it as such. Know that it's not absolute, that it is you imparting your beliefs into the system, and you can change that. But it is a good, as humans, we need to have judgment. We need to know good from bad. But getting to neutral helps us sometimes. I just want to say, so you get confused sometimes that I'm saying, oh no, no judgment. No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Right. And this goes back to the concept of the Pareto principle. So the Pareto principle states the 80-20 rule, but I like to divide this into the 10-80-10 rule. So just to Bob's point there, yes, we do have to recognize good and bad, but we don't want to stay in that place forever. So when I say 10-80-10, what I'm saying is you want to spend about 10% of your time recognizing the past, because we can learn from that and grow. And we want to spend 10% in the future, because that provides opportunity for us and it pulls us closer to that end result. But then 80% of the time should be in the present, and that should be planning, preparing, analyzing, delegating all of that information that you've taken. So you're spot on again, Bob. It's not that good and bad shouldn't be a part of our world. We need that, right? We need that, but it shouldn't be 90% of our time. If we get to that point, we're spending way too much energy and effort in the wrong area. So it should be 10% recognition of past, 80% in the present, and 10% recognition for the future. Awesome points, guys. Awesome conversation. Anything else before we do this last part? Okay, great. So number 3, and definitely the hardest of the two, is you have to make the choice. You've got to make the decision, right? It comes down to the fact that you need to make the choice of, are you going to be a victim today or a victor? Just making the choice is a battle in and of itself. I'll give you a real life story. 4 years ago, not exactly 4 years to date, right? I still have like 3 weeks, but 4 years ago, this exact time, I got a call and I lost everything. I had come out of pocket to pay for my biological father's funeral, who was not in my life. I spent every penny on it. I sold my part of the business out. I had to get out of my lease. I was literally living in my car with my dog and all of my possessions 4 years ago. True story. Okay. At that point in time, I was playing the victim the whole time. Why did this happen to me? Oh, I came out of pocket and paid for the funeral, but now the family won't even talk to me. I didn't even get to go to the actual funeral. Why me? Why me? And I played this story over and over again. Now, mind you, this all occurred at the end of October. I didn't have heat in my car, and so it was starting to get cold, right? My dog and I are cuddled up in the back seat. Like, it was rough. I could have stayed in that place. That would have been the victim. But making the choice to not live that like that anymore was that shift. And it started by simply making the choice. I had to choose that I am no longer going to live that way anymore. That is not for me. It's not my identity. It's not how I define myself. And therefore, it's not my action, because identity and behavior drives action. So you got to make the choice. Massive action is the cure-all to anything. If we look at any of these dilemmas right here, my finances aren't great. Okay, go enroll in a finances course. Go talk to a financial advisor, right? Take massive action. Nobody's just going to come off the street and go, hey man, here's 10 mil. Good luck. It doesn't happen, right? And if it does, we're splitting it. I can't start my own business. I don't have the resources like other people do. Okay, take ownership. Choose to be the victor. Start with a book. Start with a podcast. Start by pulling somebody into your circle that has got the results. That is making the choice. That is the first step. Well, look, I'll never be successful because nobody in my family is. Nobody's ever shown me how to do it. Okay, go find a person who is. Go find the person that you want to have a similar lifestyle to and send them emails, send them letters. I started working with Tony Robbins just over a year ago. It was tough to get access to him because he has a program right now where he's got hundreds of thousands of coaches. So if you want to enroll into a Tony Robbins program, yeah, you can go online and Google it and jump into the program, but you're not going to work with Tony Robbins, right? So I literally harassed his assistant. I sent mail. I sent a letter every single week for 5 weeks, like whatever it took. But again, making that choice to get access to those people, that starts with the decision. Hey, look, everybody in my family is big. We're big bone. It's just how we are. That's not a thing, right? Bones don't drastically change in circumference just because of genetics, right? Bones are bones. And so again, don't take the route of devoiding ownership, but rather make the decision that I'm not going to live this way. And it starts with baby steps. You know what? Tomorrow, I'm just not going to eat a donut. I'm going to eat a pear instead. That's the decision. And it starts by small little steps. Well, look, we've always done it this way. We've always done it this way. So we're not going to make a change. That kills more businesses than you can imagine, because again, evolution. Now, when we talk about somebody like Matt in the tech world, I mean, shoot, the tech world, what, changes every week? So imagine working with somebody every day. Yeah, I believe that actually every day. So, you know, imagine somebody saying, oh, well, we've always done it this way. I think back to in the 90s when I was growing up and we had the old wooden box TV. That thing was huge. It probably weighed half a ton. You know, now imagine if we always did it this way and you walked into somebody's house and they still had that wooden box TV. That would look pretty outdated and antiquated, wouldn't it?
I still
It
run
starts
into those
with-
people.
What's that?
I still run into those people. They have the big ass CRTs, you know, that sit there and, you know, basically like if you were in your car, all you do is hook up the TV and then you have heat, you know, so.
With the VHS player on top. Yeah. You know, but again, if you stay in that model of we've always done it this way, there is some element of fear there that's not allowing you to move into that new identity. So you got to make the choice. This happened to me as a child. That's why I act this way. Look, I'm going to be real with you guys on this call. I was under this premise for a big portion of my life. You know, this happened to me. Oh, my dad wasn't in the picture. Oh, I was heavily abused. Oh, I was molested. I was homeless. I faced addiction. I went through all of these things. Those are all true to me, right? That's all vulnerable truths that I'm sharing with you guys. And I could have held on to that and been a really bad person. And I did that in my 20s. I was bad to people, right? I didn't ever look out for anybody else. I was selfish because I thought people were just out to get me. But I had to shift that mentality, right? And so if you stay under that premise of, oh, this happened to me, then you will never get the results you want. So again, you got to make that decision that that is no longer my identity. Yes, that happened, but it did not happen to me. It happened for me. And I firmly believe that because now I'm able to empathize and relate to people of all different colors, ages, walks, backgrounds, whatever, because I went through those things. So therefore, those didn't happen to me. They happened for me so that I could change somebody else's life, because now I can relate to you on a level that not everybody can. That is a privilege, right? So now when I talk to people and I tell them my story and they say, oh, I'm so sorry that that happened, I'm not at all. I'm grateful for it, because if I didn't go through that, I would just be an average Joe. I wouldn't be able to change people's lives and create massive impact. That is a privilege. That starts with a choice. The world does not want me to win, right? We see this in multiple different areas. I took 2 steps forward and then 7 steps back. People say this all the time. There are little acronyms and things like that, or little statements that we say, but that is a victim mentality. You know, you got to understand that the world does not conspire against us. It just doesn't. There is so much going on in the world. It doesn't have the energy or effort to sit there on one individual and say, you know what, I'm just going to keep you trapped. That's on us. But we have to make that first decision. And so in order to get to that decision, we have to isolate the emotion. We have to recognize that that is occurring. We have to see that the patterns are there. Hey, this is not just a circumstantial thing. If it is a circumstance, then it's not a continued pattern. It's a one-off. This happened because of this. But if we isolate the emotion, we can see that it's been repeated and reinforced over time. Now we have the power and the strength to make the decision not to act that way anymore. It's not about fixing your old model. It's about creating an entirely new one. It's about building a whole new model. That is the key to long-term sustainability. If you want to have long-term results, go through this process, but you got to make the choice. And then at that point, you leverage the power of win or loss, or in another way to put this, of pleasure, the seeking of pleasure, or the avoidance of pain. Any questions, thoughts, or feedback on this?
Well, just to get back to what Brendan said, you always get to make the choice. And the choice is not dictated by the past. And so even if you're going back on an old pattern, that's still a choice to bring that pattern back into the future. It's your choice to bring it there. You're the one bringing it. You get to choose. You're not dictated to live the past at all. The future has endless possibilities. Which one are you going to choose? Which one do you get to choose? And you actually get to choose them. But you do have to have that moment to be able to see the endless possibilities, which is the breaking of the pattern. You have to, like you said, have the self-recognition that, oh, this is just a pattern that I'm doing here. I don't have to do this, what I've always done. I have a choice. And now what are the choices I have available to you? And that's where sometimes it really helps, like you said before, to have an objective point of view to help you stop and think and see some of the endless possibilities and then choose which ones you want. You may choose the one that you did 1,000 times before, but at least it's your choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always our choice, right? You know, and also you alluded to this as well, Bob, but having clarity on that end result. Like, what is it that you want? What does that outcome look like? I mean, we can't hit a target if we don't know where it is or what it looks like.
And so I also think about when I hear all of this, being the victor does not mean the outcome was the way that I expected it.
Yes.
It's that I was the one who chose.
Mm.
You know, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. That my victory is not based on the outcome that I become the millionaire or that I become whatever it is I'm looking for. My victory is that I made a choice.
Boom.
I made what I thought was the best choice at that time. And I didn't let the world be my chooser, if you will, the affect, being the affect of the world. Victor starts with choosing. I don't know what the outcome is.
Beautifully said. I hope you guys capture that. That was spot on. And the great thing is, it just starts with winning one choice.
Yeah.
Don't get caught in the insurmountability of radically changing your life in one day. It doesn't happen that way. You know, you guys have heard that statement, Rome wasn't built in a day. Well, I mean, that's the concept we're talking about here, is that, yes, it is your choice. And all you got to do is win that one choice in this moment. That's it. Just one. And then tomorrow you win one or two more, and then one or two more the next day, until eventually now you've separated yourself from that victimhood because you've made that repeated choice over and over and over until you have no other model to live on.
Yeah,
In
I mean,
that
I think,
way,
sorry, go ahead.
in that way, there's like almost a certain amount of pain that needs to happen for an individual until you're even ready to have that unbiased source come and give you that gut check that we've been talking about. And before you're ready to say, well, you know what, I'm going to win on one choice, or I'm going to recognize these patterns, you know, shifting this around. And instead of looking at ourselves with this, I feel like myself, at least, I've been in situations where I could see that a friend or a loved one is like in this loop, and I will almost like duty myself to say, you know what, let's sit down. I have a thought that I just want to put in front of you. And it gets swatted away. Like, you don't understand. This is the way my life is. This is what happens to me. And it's this matter of maybe just not enough pain has happened yet that they're ready to mobilize into some form of action. Or also, to Bob's point earlier, they're experiencing some anger with it, but they're not frustrated just yet. They're not fully into that first step of it. And so I guess all I'm really trying to say is recognizing your own or the individual's location in the journey is really important in knowing of, okay, well, maybe pattern recognition isn't even where we're at right now. We just need to talk about this story first.
Yeah, I would say pain is a much better teacher than success. We learn way more from our failures, essentially. And I think to everybody else's point, yeah, I mean, seeing the forest through the trees, being independent essentially is so much easier than obviously if you're in it. But it does take a certain level of awareness to be able to say, yeah, I need an independent, unbiased opinion, essentially, to step in here in whatever format in life and say, sure, this is the way forward. And of course, you also have to have the mindset that everybody else has discussed here, that, yeah, you know, I'm the victim essentially, and I can change the stars. Now, my journey may not be as easy as somebody else's or something like that, because I'm starting here. So, you know, it depends on where you're starting in the roadmap, but we all have our own journey essentially. And if you want to achieve something, you can. It's just a matter of how hard you want to fight to get there.
I now want to say something that I very, very rarely say. I can use some help. Very serious.
That one's huge.
Yesterday morning, I woke up to an email from my son's girlfriend that he was in the ER and they thought he was having a heart attack. He's 36 years old. And it turns out, after he was in the ER the entire day, it's panic attacks. This is a pattern he's had for his entire life. And he's playing the victim over and over and over. And you're absolutely right, Miles. Anything I say gets swatted away with, you don't understand, or you're my father, you're not listening to me, blah, blah, blah. It is the hardest. Now, I pray for him. That he finds his way. He will. He always does. He always does. He is his father's son. He will find his way. It's the hardest thing as a parent to watch this. It is the hardest thing. And I don't know how to deal with it, seriously. And I don't know how to deal with it. So I don't know how to use this lesson. I don't know if I'm a victim here. I'm in a pattern, he's in a pattern. I don't know what the fuck is going on. I'm serious.
Well, this one's tough because it's different when it's within ourselves versus having that conversation with somebody else. Because one of the most difficult lessons that I'm sure everybody on this call has learned before, it does not matter how much you care or love about somebody or how much you want them to change or get different results, they have to want it. And that's all there is to it.
So you're right. So this is not about him. This is about me.
Well, I would say the opposite. I'd say that, you
Mhm.
know, it's about him being prepared to make that change,
Yes.
right? Because, and I'm directly speaking on this from experience with substance abuse and being with people in that area. You know, I've lost, this is a true statement. I've lost 100 people to overdoses, to drug related deaths. And so those people can't make that change if they don't want to. I can be in the car with you. I can have the conversations with you. I literally have done this firsthand. I had a friend that was addicted to heroin, and I thought that by me getting in the car and driving to Baltimore with him, that I could convince him not to do it. Wasn't the case. I couldn't stop him. It was his choice, right? So a couple things, and by the way, Bob, I do want to have a conversation with you about this. So let's save that on a separate note just because of time. And I do think that is a different talk. It is under this umbrella, but it's a little bit of a different talk because again, it's not you directly. It's somebody else that you're very much attached to, very much love. And obviously you want the best results for him, right? Different conversation than when it's internal. So we'll definitely talk about that. But I want to address one thing that Miles had said there, and that Jeremy was talking about as well. One of the things that I've learned is that pain is the greatest catalyst. Now, here's the catch-22. We don't want to strictly rely on pain because here's why. You'll get into a situation where it's only crisis based. Oh, well, I'll keep putting off that hole in my roof, even though the water's trickling into my house. I'll just put it off until the actual roof caves in, then I'll deal with it, right? And that's what we do. We do step 1 and 2. We recognize that it's there. We see the pattern, but then we're like, oh, I'll just wait until something catastrophic happens for me to take action. So you've got to be able to have that awareness. And that's where the non-biased source is really helpful. Or that's why having a good friend that actually shoots you straight, that's where these people are really powerful because they allow you to catch these things before you're forced into it from a crisis.
Well, I got to go, but that's exactly what I said to him yesterday. He just lets these things pile up without dealing with each one as they come up. He knows it's happening, but he pushes it down until it just explodes and he's in the hospital. And he almost recognized that. So I think you and he are going to have a conversation, and I got to go. I'll talk to you later. I love you guys.
Thank you for your truths today. Bye, Bob.
Take care, Bob. Love you, brother.
So I want to share one last thing with you guys really quickly. And this is based on that same point that Jeremy and Miles were talking about with the pain as a catalyst. And has anybody ever seen the movie Friday the 13th here? Do you guys know there are 8 of them?
Yeah.
There are 8
ridiculous.
Friday the 13th. The
think
first
they're
one was
making
made in
another two.
1984. The last one was just made, I believe it was 2019.
Yes.
So out of all of those, everybody on here has seen a movie before. We all know that technology has advanced in that 30-year time frame. And so it would be very reasonable to assume that the content of the movie, even though the storyline might stay the same, but the effects, the green screen, the visuals, all that stuff should enhance the quality of the movie over a 30-year period.
Yeah.
But in my humble opinion, I believe the first one is the best of all 8. And the reason for that is because they leverage disgust. They leverage the element of disgust more strategically than any other movie. Here's what I mean. They'll show a point and very quickly, very, very quickly they do this. It's not part of the storyline, but they'll show a very fast image. I'm talking like 1 or 2 seconds where they'll show this image of like a bucket of bloodied worms or like a bunch of maggots like on this corpse. And so they'll do all these random things like that throughout the movie. So you just see that really quickly, and it's not part of the storyline, but automatically, emotionally, you go, "Ugh, that's disgusting." And because of that journey of emotion, that roller coaster of emotions through the movie, it just sticks with you. It resonates, and you're like, "Man, that was a great movie."
Mhm.
You can leverage disgust in your daily life. Take something that you are disgusted by, that you absolutely don't want, and that could be a ton of different things, but you affiliate that as a pain point to force you into action, right? So instead of you actually having to lose your house or lose your car or lose 20 grand, you can use simple imagery in your mind. So any last minute thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns before we close out today, guys?
I think it's a great topic that affects all of us probably at some point in our lives in some shape, form, or fashion. And all of us have to figure out how to deal with it. And probably most of us have figured out what you've actually described in that Word document in different ways, and we didn't even realize it. I mean, for personal experience, I certainly can. So yeah, it's figure out that you can't be the victim essentially, and you have to find the right path and all this good stuff and figure out how to capitalize on your strengths. And yeah, it's just something that is universal, and I probably, like I said, touches all of us at one point or another.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And in ways that we might not even be realizing. This is something I think I'm pretty young, but I feel like this might be one of those lifelong games of cat and mouse. Am I playing the victim? Am I playing the victor? I'm always playing the victor, but then this one thing is going on and you take a step back and you're like, oh crap, I've been playing the victim here.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness and all that good stuff. I used to have a boss, because I'd say I wasn't very good at that, and he'd be like, really? I mean, acknowledging essentially and having self-awareness, because I mean, you're all going to have weaknesses essentially. We all do.
Yep.
And that goes back to seeing the forest through the trees from an independent standpoint. So yeah, I mean, my business is 50% built on that basically.
100%. And then that's perspective, shifting the perspective. I've worked with people in the trauma space, and regardless of whether it's a small trauma or catastrophic trauma, the one thing that separates trauma victims is optimism. That's it. And this is reinforced by conclusive data from Harvard, not just my opinion, right? Optimism is the catalyst. That comes through shifting your perspective, right? So anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all the conversation. This was great. And I will close out. By the way, really quickly, if anybody has any specific topics they would like to address on these meetings, I'm always open to them. So feel free to just shoot me a text or an email, and I'll make a script accordingly.
Gotcha.
All right, guys, crush your Tuesday. Thank you all for your time.
You guys take care. Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.